Shankar is someone who has, worked equally in the corporate sector as well as in the social sector. In the corporate sector, he's worked for organizations like AF Ferguson and PwC. And in the social sector, he's worked with organizations such as ActionAid and American India Foundation. And he was also the head of sustainability at the Tata Group. And currently, he also advises the Ministry of Corporate Affairs on matter of CSR. And he's also the current chairperson of Oxfam India. So without much ado, I could go on for some time, but without much ado, I would like to hand over the dais to Shankar. Shankar, over to you.
Thank you so much, Adil, and I'm thankful to ISDM for inviting me to do this. I have to say that, Adil, you need to allow me to screen share. It's not allowing me at the moment.
1 second, sir.
I have to say that, I'm old friends with ISDM, with many of people at ISDM. So it's always a pleasure to sort of get engaged with something that they're doing. So I very happily agreed to do this. My only trepidation was in the use of the term master class, because that is a bit scary. So just to sort of manage everyone's expectations, this is basically something that I'm going to speak about because I've been asked to do that. But I think equally, as you will see at different points, I'm going to invite all of you participants to also chip in, because some of the things that I'm talking about is there's not enough information available in the public domain, because there's lots happening. I know, I hear it anecdotally, but there's not enough put into the public domain in a systematic manner. And one of the things I was telling Adil in an earlier conversation is that I think that all people who attend these master classes are as much contributors to knowledge as the people who are addressing these master classes. So any of the knowledge that you provide as we go through today's session will be valued. So the title, as you know, is Engaging Companies, CSR and Beyond. And what I'm therefore trying to talk to you about is that engaging companies on CSR is very important. That's something that all of us must do. Many of us already do that. But there is life to engaging companies beyond CSR. And what I'm going to do is to explore some of these options and these ideas with you during the course of the next, hopefully, half an hour. In fact, after that, at various points, we will invite also inputs from those of you who are participating, and then we'll get into a larger Q&A session. We have an hour, but I'm happy to extend it by a bit if required, but I think it being Friday night, so let's try and see whether we can keep time. Why do we even bother with business? It's very important to all of us, especially in the social sector. Why do we spend so much of time thinking about business? I think there are multiple reasons, but I'm just going to talk about two. One is they are just such huge entities. So 79 of the top 100 revenue generators globally are actually corporations. So if you look at the list on your screen, these are large corporations whose revenues, when stacked against countries, are something like this. So the amount of weight and heft they have is huge. So obviously we need to engage with them. And because of the size and the enormity, we definitely need to engage with them beyond just on CSR. So in a sense, that's the reason why I think we need to look at this. Also, what I think why we need to start doing that is, if in the past, the way companies would operate in terms of how they would make the profits, what they would do to the environment, and what happens in society, if they were completely unlinked to each other, it is not so anymore. And there are clearly overlaps that we can see. In fact, I don't see very long before all these three circles are completely overlapped, which means that a company's business and the amount of profits it makes is going to be determined as much by how it runs its core business in terms of technology, people, market shares, all that stuff that many of us are taught about business, but also how it impacts society and the environment. And that's the triple bottom line thinking. It's here to stay. It's not going to go away. If anything, it's going to get more and more overlap. So therefore, this is an opportunity, I think, for all of us to start engaging companies and help them go down this journey, because it's not just good for the planet, it's not just good for society, it's good for companies themselves. So that's the reason why we think we need to engage with companies beyond CSR. So let me start with a quick poll, and this is where I'm going to hand it to Adil. I just want to get a sense of the house, just to get a temperature of all of you participating in today's discussion.
Shankar, would you like to start sharing your screen and then I'll go for the poll?
Okay. Hang on. I thought my screen had started sharing, but okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Is that now?
Yeah. Now
visible?
we can see you. Now we can see you. So I'm going ahead with the first poll.
Yeah. Yes, please. So the first question is on the screen. So how many of you from CSOs in this particular participants have engaged with companies at all? Just trying to get a sense of it. Okay. So it's roughly 2 out of every 3 of you have had some engagement with companies. So that's good. So the ones that have answered yes, you are now hereby recruited as part of the providers of the master in this masterclass, because I think there is much to be learned from all of you. So that's good. So let's go to the second poll, Adil, and ask the question, those who have engaged with companies, how many of you have done so in ways other than in terms of CSR? So,
yeah, the poll is live.
Yeah. So it looks like we're getting a 60-40 split. So in some senses, what I'm reading into this is that a bulk of you who have engaged with companies on CSR, a bulk of them have actually gone beyond just CSR. So I don't know, maybe you guys shouldn't be in this masterclass because you're already clearly the masters. But since you're here, you might as well just stay for the rest and add value to those who, to the rest of us in this. So thank you, Adil, for that. That's a good temperature check. So I'm going to then continue, and I'm going to, at various points of time, seek your inputs, those of you who have engaged with companies beyond CSR, to sort of help me with some examples as we go along on what are the different ways that we can do it. But I'll continue on my journey and talk about some of the lessons that I have learned over the last couple of years. Okay. Right. So the first obvious thing is, let's talk CSR. And I'm not going to talk CSR for very long. I think all of you are well versed with it, but I just want to quickly point out to a few things just to keep in mind. I am struggling with changing the, okay. Okay. So when you're looking at CSR, typically the way the companies tend to look at it is on 3 dimensions. And I think it's very important for you to understand these 3 dimensions before you decide which company to invest time on. One is the geographies. what are the geographies that are of interest to companies in terms of their CSR? Where do they want to actually make investments in the community? The second question that you need to obviously ask is, which are the sectors? Is it education? Is it health? Is it livelihoods, environment, whatever? All those Schedule 7 set of things, which of them are they interested in? Because what you work on and what they work on has to match. It has to match in terms of geography. It has to match on sectors. And it also has to match on whether they do actually believe in partnerships or not. So do they actually think that working in partnerships with NGOs, CSOs, and other community organizations is the way they want to do CSR? So I think these are the three very key questions that obviously all of you must be asking. But just to remind ourselves that if any of these boxes are not ticked, then the chances of your getting very far with a company in terms of even its CSR is not very good. So you might as well figure out whether it's worth your while doing that. Now, where do you get this information? And this is where the Companies Act 2013, Clause 135 becomes very important, because that Clause 135 makes companies answer several questions, but two of them are most relevant for you to get this information. One is, what is the CSR policy? They are required by the Act to disclose what the CSR policy is, and their CSR policy necessarily needs to indicate all of this. Now, before you go and speak to a company, you must look at their CSR policy and see whether these boxes get ticked in your case. The other thing about that you need to look at is the reports. They are required by law to publish their CSR reports every year. So looking at these reports also gives you a sense of how relevant these are. These kinds of information were somewhat opaque in the past. Right now they're not. And so you need to leverage that, and you need to make sure this happens. So this is one very basic hygiene that you need to do in your CSR. But apart from keeping that in mind, one also has to remember the thinking companies have when they do their CSR. So if you look at the whole development process in a very simplistic way, that it consists either the approach could be welfare or empowerment or actually rights. The rights-based approach is one end, and the welfare, give a man a fish, is at the other end. Where do the development players stack up? Most of them, if you look at governments are in the two extremes. We are a welfare state by constitution, so they do a lot of welfare. It is the government's job, the state's job, to create rights, so they are in the rights. So legal rights through the constitution. NGOs and private foundations that fund grassroots organizations are somewhere in the empowerment to rights space, probably going to the right. Agencies, which are like multilateral agencies, the World Banks, the ADBs, the UN system, the bilateral agencies, don't really get too much into the welfare side, because that's obviously the government's role. They are somewhere closer to the empowerment. Maybe some of them go into the rights side of things. But you have to understand that companies are very much on the left of this picture. And this is an important understanding to have, because I've heard many NGOs complain that, we went to this company with a proposal on women's empowerment, or, creating on some rights-based approach for people with disability, and they were not interested. I think getting companies who might be interested in the right side of this development space is going to be a very rare phenomenon. They exist, you will find them, but that's not what I would bet on. So depending on the kind of work that you're doing, I think you should be very clear that what is the sweet spot for companies, and that is toward the left of the picture. So this is what I wanted to just speak to you about CSR. So very quickly, understand the company, understand the kind of ways companies tend to operate, and then go about your CSR. Otherwise, you will waste your time, or you will be disappointed. Now let's sort of look beyond CSR. Now, one of the things that you need to look at beyond CSR is beyond the check writing. Now, in the past, CSR was defined in different ways, but after the act, it gets defined only in one way. It gets defined by what are the things that are there in the Schedule 7, and it's about the expenditure that is made. Nothing else counts. But the good news is that there is more to a company, even in terms of community engagement, than that CSR expenditure or check that they write. And I think it's about trying to explore those. What would they be? Employee volunteering, the very obvious thing. Now, employee volunteering is not counted as CSR. And that's something that many of us who've been trying to advocate with the ministry have been trying to say, include this, find some way to include it. They're adamant that it's not worth it because it's too much of a hassle to get into the calculation. But employee volunteering is a very valuable input for you in just in the way that you work. So employee volunteering is obviously something that you need to do, and there are many companies who do that. And here's just a partial list of them. And I think that this is something that you need to engage with. So even if you don't get that check from a company, even if you get them to find ways to engage their employees through a volunteering program, that's terrific. And employee volunteering actually is of two kinds. One is just somebody coming and doing something very, very basic, absolutely of value, but it is a very basic thing. The other is where you can use the skills that they have, the expertise that they have, the experience that they have as business people, and which is relevant into your NGO. Now, creating those opportunities, identifying and creating those opportunities is a big challenge for NGOs. But if you do that, there is huge value. In fact, I used to be with the Tata Group, as was told to you some time back. We had this program called Tata Engage, which was a volunteering program. But in that, we had carved out something called Pro Engage, which is professional engagement. And Pro Engage was essentially about how do we get the professional skills of volunteers to be brought to bear. And many of the companies you see here, IBM, Wipro, Mahindras, all of them have that as a very, very integral part of it. So employee volunteering is a very key part of what you need. The second is cause-related marketing. Cause-related marketing is a very interesting idea. It's about how companies actually can create and support a cause that is dear to them. But in that process of supporting the cause, there is potential for your work, either directly or indirectly, from benefiting from that. And again, here are some examples. So for example, if you look at the one right in the middle, Easy with Cry. Now, what Easy is, as you know, used for washing, is detergent for very valuable things like woolens and so on and so forth. So what this program does is, with every bottle of Easy that you buy, a certain amount, I think it is 1 rupee, goes into a fund which is then used to buy warm clothes, which is then through Cry is distributed to kids for winter clothes. Similarly, P&G has this program where every time you buy a P&G product, a certain amount goes to girls' education, and so on and so forth. So there are many such examples. There used to be a lot more. And in fact, I was surprised at the fact that this is sort of plateaued here. But maybe it's also because one doesn't know about enough of these examples. But this is the idea of cause-related marketing that is something that NGOs and CSOs should be thinking about. So the question I have for you is, if there are more examples that any of you have on cause-related marketing, which I have not talked about, do ping Adil, and you will be. We'll invite you to come towards the end and talk about that, because I think we need to have more such examples out in the public domain so that all of us can learn from it. So this is a request to all of you participants. If you have many more examples, do come and share, and let's all learn from that. Okay, moving on. Beyond community engagement, beyond CSR, what are the other things that one can? very big part of it is engaging employees on development. Now, this is a very interesting area because one of the things that is becoming a global phenomenon and is also beginning to be seen happening in India is that employees are saying, and especially Gen Next is saying, millennials, they are saying that we don't necessarily want to work in a company that gives us the highest salary. We want to work in companies that we feel good about, that gives us opportunities to express our own beliefs in terms of how we need to be in the world. So it's it's about saying we want to work with companies with a purpose. So actually this piece is becoming very important, which is why the volunteering piece that I spoke about, where companies enable employees to volunteer, is becoming very big. And so there are ways to engage employees on development, even if it is not through the CSR or the volunteering. What are the options before you? One is, of course, payroll giving. This has been around for a long time in India. I wouldn't be surprised if many of the participants in this particular class are in NGOs that have been part of a payroll giving process. Very, very powerful, because it's not just the money that is important, but it's also engaging the employee in a conversation. And please remember one thing: employees are very influential within the company. Employees are very influential within the society. Employees are also consumers, so they also buy products, and the choice of products can influence the way companies behave. So payroll giving is a very important element, not just because it can give you money, but it gives you connect with employees, which is a very important part. The second is, of course, personal volunteering. I've known this in the case of Tata's. I can tell you this is very common. I have many people who joined the Tata Engage program or even a Pro Engage program. What they've started to do is, apart from going through the company, they have actually started doing things on their own. And their kids have got involved, their siblings have got involved. So the amount of people, this ecosystem of volunteers and skilled volunteers has actually increased significantly. So every time you engage with an employee, even outside the formal volunteering that his company might be doing, you are actually engaging with a large number of people who actually might buy into some of the issues that you're talking about and can be advocates for the issues that you're talking about. And of course, finally, the way to engage with employees is also to directly get them involved in some of the issues that you're working through, some of these issues, or allow melas during Diwali and festivals, so that you can put stalls and you can enable more and more engagement on some of the issues that you're working on as an NGO. So the engaging employees is a very, very crucial element. It takes a lot of work, but believe me, the investment is an investment. It's not a cost. And when you think of it as an investment, the returns are there for you to see. So engaging employees is one of the very important ways of looking beyond CSR. Many organizations are involved in helping payroll giving. This is just a first cut list of some of them that I know of. I saw that there were some folks from Concern India in this masterclass. So Concern is also does this, but these are three, and there may be many more. I have no direct links with any of them, but I'm just giving them up as ideas that you could then approach in case the NGO that you're part of wants to get into a payroll giving program. What are the other ways beyond that? At a philosophical level, one of the things that you've got to remember is the closer you're linked with the core business of a company, the more consistent is that relationship going to be. The trouble with CSR is that it is a function of the profits that the companies make. So, for example, this year, we know that the profits are going to be low thanks to COVID. So many CSR budgets have been cut. Now, in the kind of work that many of us do in development, we cannot be subject to these kinds of cycles. So actually, you need to sort of find ways to sort of overcome this up and down nature of CSR thing. So linking with the core business is often a very good way of trying to do that. Let me give you some examples of what this can be. One is, think of companies as customers. How can you actually produce stuff or the stuff that your communities produce? How can they be actually sold to companies? And there are multiple ways of doing that. And these are just some examples of products. Many companies do this. Jindal, the Tata Group. So whether it is uniforms for their factory workers, whether it is safety equipment for their factory workers, vegetables for canteens, vegetables, which canteens provide, or in where they have housing complexes of companies, how they can help you do that. A very interesting one was agarbattis, which became a product actually for ITC, which started off as a CSR thing, but they actually ended up being a commercial relationship with ITC, and that became a different product line for them. Masks, which is of course a very COVID-19 thing, but as we all know, COVID may reduce, but it's not going to go away. So masks are going to be part of our lives going forward, sadly. And this is something, again, that companies would buy. So products of different kinds are something that you can be providing to companies. And this is something that is less cyclical. It's something that is more ongoing. But apart from that, also services, janitorial services, cleaning services, again, in canteens. One was, I was saying, providing vegetables, but I know of several companies that actually get the SHG groups to come and help them with making chapatis during lunch time, because that's when you need a large workforce to actually do that. So then you have potential for employment for a lot of these. BPOs, especially rural BPOs, and I know that many companies find this as a very attractive opportunity. So all these are ways by which you actually get into the core business, and the closer you get to the core business, the longer it's going to stay. One interesting example I remember doing very long ago when I started off in this space. I'm talking late 90s, where we had an interesting arrangement with Titan, where Titan actually farmed out the fixing the strap of watches to an NGO that employed women from that local area. So it was an ancillary unit that actually provided this kind of service to the company. So think of companies actually as a business partner, as a customer. Again, any more examples? Happy to share. Happy to share this publicly. Please ping any ideas that you might have to Adil, and we can look at some more examples of this. Moving on. Again, linking with business. How can communities, community organizations, NGOs actually be distributors for companies? This is again a very exciting idea, not completely old. Everybody's heard of the Shakti program of Unilever. Now it's decades old. But I remember in my early days, when I got into the sector, we were one of those organizations who were talking to Unilever about doing Shakti. But many more. If you look at Tata Tea, they've been running this program called Gaon Chalo for a long time, where actually some of the distribution is done through community groups and NGOs. So the last mile distribution at the village level is actually done through NGOs. Similarly, GSK has done this directly with NGOs, with the SHG groups. They started off with Horlicks, but my friend who sort of worked with them on some research on this was telling me how products like Iodex actually were the ones that were big selling with them. Sensodyne toothpaste was one of those things that was sold to them. So there's a big win for the company, but there is a huge income that accrues to the SHG group and the women over there. Similarly, TTK, the Prestige, pressure cookers. So a lot of the order booking is done by individual women entrepreneurs on the field who do these orders and therefore make an income. Tata Swatch, which is their filter. So looking at and of course you got to be careful with the product, right? The product has to be ethical, has to fit in with your own value systems and so on and so forth. But this is an opportunity, especially for those who are working in rural parts of the country, that you can get into a business relationship and actually help companies distribute their products. So that's the other link. And any more examples like this, please ping to Adil and we can sort of take a look at them. A third way of linking with business is to help build supply chains. Now, this is particularly true, and a lot of examples I have which I'll present is in the agricultural sector, where companies are looking to procure agricultural produce or produce from rural locations, which are mainly agriculture, primary products. And one of the things that they do is obviously go through the traditional middleman system. But they also realize that has its own set of complications. So many of them have started to look at alternative supply chains, and which is where NGOs, producer groups, farmer producer organizations have a role to play. And NGOs that work with these kinds of groups can therefore intermediate on these kinds of options. So the kind of products that you see are myriad. So for example, potatoes with Pepsi, haldi that Tata Chemicals is trying to look at, vegetables, many companies that have vegetable as part of their business is doing that. Tamarind, coconut, in fact, this company, what's it called? The coconut or parachute oil people, they need a supply chain for coconuts, chilies. So all of these alternative supply chains are where they're looking for help in trying to build these supply chains. And that's where NGOs like ECO, for example, have played a huge role in this to make these kinds of supply chains happen. So again, more examples welcome, and we would all learn from that. Then, of course, the piece is on providing services. Now, this is the one where I see the potential. There have been NGOs that have been part of who sort of tried to do this on and off, but it's something that it's a type of business that one needs to develop. One is market testing. So I again know of ECO working with this company called DSM that had some nutritional supplements to rice. So they actually wanted some market testing done in Jharkhand. So they got an NGO to help them through the SHGs to do the market testing, provide the feedback so that they could figure out whether this is something that they could do. There have been companies that have wanted the supply chains to be assessed in terms of human rights, in terms of child labor, especially where these supply chains are not the tier one, not the one immediately, but down the line, where you have long supply chains, and the last supply chain is really very far away, somewhere in rural India. So how do we know that human rights issues are being dealt with? How do we know that child labor is not there, forced labor is not there? So this is again where NGOs can provide these services like a professional fee, because this is something you guys know and you care about and you're passionate about. And similarly, a social and environmental impact of companies, their own CSR interventions. Obviously, you know development better than they do. And so if this is a service that you can develop and say, obviously as an independent, you can independently assess to see what are the good things about your interventions, what is not working, and we could help you with that. So these are some examples of how you can actually link up with the business, and actually that is a more stable relationship that you can have with companies. Again, inviting any suggestions, any experiences from all of the participants in this. Finally, to the Holy Grail. What is the Holy Grail of corporate engagement? I think many people might have a different views on this, but for me, the Holy Grail is how do we advocate and influence responsible behavior from companies? How can we actually get companies to listen to us and say, this kind of behavior that you've done in this place is not helpful and you need to change, and we can help you change that. That's the sort of Holy Grail. And I think this is a big part of what NGOs can do. Very difficult perhaps for an individual NGO to do it, but this is where collectives of NGOs can play a huge role. And this is again, very important in the context of what I said earlier of the size of companies and the influence that they have on just about all our lives, including public policy. So I think it is our responsibility to actually push companies into responsible behavior. And to me, that's a huge engagement. Now, if you go up, if you do any of the other kinds of things that we've talked about now, it actually sets you up in a very good way to be able to do this. Because the moment you have a trusting relationship with a company, the chances of them taking you seriously is very high. So to be reaching the Holy Grail is not where you start. It's probably where you should be, where your ambition should be. And influencing company behavior, one way to do it is the way Greenpeace does. But that's not the only way. That is a very important way to do it, but that's not the only way. So being a trusted advisor, being somebody who the company trusts and says, yeah, fine, I will do this, is an important element of this. And for that, one of the things that we need to start doing, which NGOs are terrible at, is actually analyzing reports. One of the things that, you have, the Companies Act mandates CSR reporting. There is something called a business responsibility report, which the top 500 companies are supposed to report on. And in fact, that has now been increased to the top 1,000. I've been involved in the design of those business responsibility reports. And as we speak, the next version, the next generation of this business responsibility report is going to be produced. Trouble is, nobody analyzes them, especially from civil society. I mean, when I say nobody, there is just one group called Corporate Watch, which consists of Praxis and Oxfam and a few others who actually analyze this. But I think it's important for us to analyze, understand these reports, because only by doing that, only by gathering that evidence, can we actually critique behavior of companies instead of making generalizations. We can be much more specific to what we want to change in a company or in a sector, and then not only what we want to change, but how or what is the change, what is the solution. So I think the Holy Grail is, I think, what we finally are all seeking, and we need to get there step by step. So I'm almost at the end of my presentation. So we look at CSR, we look at community engagement beyond CSR, but we look at several other ways of engaging with companies, and I've talked about 3 boxes of them, and within that several layers of ways that we can do. But just ending with a few challenges. I think there are 4 big challenges that any NGO that wants to do this, wants to go beyond CSR, needs to be ready for. One is the fact that when you look at all these engagements, they actually involve different parts of the company. So it is not just good enough for you to just connect with the CSR guy. That's fine for the CSR. But if you want to get into employee engagement, you have to go to the HR people. If you want to talk about looking at companies as your customers, you got to speak to the procurement people. If you want to tell companies, we look at your supply chains and make sure that there are no human rights violations, you again have to speak to the procurement people. If you want to do cause-related marketing, or if you want to do things like that, you have to speak to the marketing guys. If you want to become a distributor, you have to speak to the sales guys. So what you'll have to do, and that's the challenge, that it's not good enough for you to speak to the CSR guy, but you've got to use that to get to different parts of the company. And that's one big challenge. The second, of course, is going beyond your comfort zone, because all of these things have, NGOs are comfortable up to some point, but some of them are really not something that come naturally to NGOs. So it does involve going beyond your comfort zone. And so each one has to make a choice. Is this worth it or not? But it will definitely take you beyond your comfort zone. The third challenge is, all these things happen. Are you then going to become over-dependent on the company? I think it's a very important point. It's something that you need to interrogate, ask yourself, and make that choice. And finally, are you going to get co-opted? That's always the big question. And again, it is a real question. You can't wish it away, but it's an important question. And you have to ask yourself, all the benefits that one spoke about, is it worth it at the end? Just remember that engagement with the company is different from getting married to the company. Okay, you can engage, you can disengage when you have something that you have a problem with, and you should not fear to disengage when it gets beyond that. But these are challenges that you need to be ready for. So I'm going to end there and hand it back to Adil to see whether there are any examples we can get from the floor, and then we can take Q&As. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shankar. I think that was really thought-provoking. And, I think it also dealt with a lot of myths that we have in our mind about CSR. So there are a few examples that have come up. I'm just going to request our friend Prashant so that he can share his experiences. Prashant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Prashant, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks, Shankar. It was very good insight into a lot of spaces where we can engage beyond check. And one such experience I had personally was of a business skill transfer program, wherein one of the multinational financial companies volunteered to spend time with a farmers cooperative society in rural Karnataka. And surprisingly, this is one of the very few cooperative societies who is thriving and has 100 crore turnover. But the entire focus is on betel nuts. And they didn't realize that if anything goes wrong with the crop, they are in a trouble, both the farmers and the cooperative society. So this team of professionals who spent 1 week on their professional development program helped develop a business plan. And they looked at their risks, they looked at what other areas they can diversify into, leverage on their existing strengths. And this business plan has now helped them go beyond betel nut. And because the betel nut is affected both by the fluctuating prices and production due to changing weather and the climate change. So now, 10 years down the line, this cooperative society has been successful in looking at various other ventures. And that business plan, which would have costed them huge sum of money if they had to do it with the help of professional company, has helped them sustain. So I thought this was one of the examples. Yeah,
very good.
I wanted to.
So in fact, it'd be nice if you could just share this with Adil in a little bit more detail, because I think in ISDM, one of the things we can start doing is putting these examples together, because as I said, these are very scattered examples. So this is an excellent one, Prashant. Thank you very much.
And one, I don't know if I have time for one more, Adil, or you want to give chance to others.
Yeah, there are some more, but Prashant, we can take this offline, yeah?
Sure.
Sure. Thank you so much, Prashant. So our next participant is Mr. Rajesh Jain, and he would also like to share an example. So Rajesh, you're on. Whenever you're ready, you can start speaking now.
You're on mute, Rajesh.
Rajesh, you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks. And thank you so much, Shankar. It was really, nice to kind of get so deep understanding of engaging beyond these companies. I would just like to share 1-2 examples. That's what I wrote to other. So now I work for a tech company. It's a AI research lab. And after spending 20 years in the social sector, I find this space as a growing space where you can actually reach out to a larger population and impact. So my experience of working with companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook has been very, very different. These large companies do want to kind of enter into the social space. They have something called, AI for social good or tech for social good. And Google has kind of set up a specific office in India to help NGOs with their requirements of learning, technology. And, all organizations can reach beyond. So that's not check, but it's about upgrading your skills, how to, update your website, how to use latest technologies so that you can do better work, reach, use Google Maps to kind of map your population, etc., etc. So I would really kind of like to share that. My other, understanding and experience of working with these companies is that they also give beyond, beyond the check. They want to train your people. So you did mention about, corporates giving their insights or giving their skills to people, but specifically having training sessions, which are like real 3-month, 6-month kind of sessions, where their staff would like to engage with your staff and upgrade these skills so that you are better off. It's like ISDM, giving training for 1 full year, but as it is, while you are working on the project, how can your skills be upgraded? They are called launch pads. So in the tech world, it's like, they launch you by giving you skills so that you can better perform to reach. And another small example is about giving their cloud space. So it's not only about giving you technology or giving you a site to reach to millions, but giving you the most expensive thing that NGOs cannot afford now, even small startup companies cannot afford, is the large cloud space. If you want to handle data of, say, lakhs and millions, then you really need that support, and these companies are ready to give. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rajesh, and thank you for those experiences. I think we have about 10
One
more
latest
minutes.
with COVID. Can I add one more? So there's an example of COVID, if you really want. So Facebook kind of gave us their data to do the mobility mapping in Mumbai. So these are good examples of how you can get things more than what just like check, but help the society. Yeah,
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rajesh. So we have about 10 more minutes left, and we are going to move to the questions that have come in, Shankar. So, one question that really we get asked a lot during our counseling sessions about ISDM is that, what makes a good CSR professional? Is it just knowing about all the guidelines and knowing about all the rules and regulations and the loopholes, or is it something more than that? Shankar, would you like to speak about that?
Yeah. So I believe that CSR is simply development done by a company. That's fundamentally what it is. So which means that you have to understand development to be able to do any CSR in an effective way. It's not it's not a managerial function. There's a lot more, space knowledge that you need in order to be able to do that. Even if you're not implementing, but you're actually supporting NGOs to do that. Understanding of development has to be key. So therefore, a program like ISDM is actually what will help you become a much better CSR person. The other element of it, and this is where the differences between the CSR person and the development professional, is that CSR has some limitations. It sort of falls within broadly what the company wants to do. it's ultimately it's not the core business of a company, right? So because it's not the core business of a company, a development professional should understand the realities of the environment of the company. So, one can't get disheartened if you think as a development professional, you have to go down path A, but because of the company's own predilections, they kind of say you need to deviate. I don't think you should deviate in an ethical way, but you need to be able to make certain adjustments so that because you're meeting two objectives. One is the community objectives or the objectives of the intervention. You're also trying to meet a company objective. So it's that balance that you got to do.
Right. Thank you so much, Shankar, for that. I have one more question that has really come in, and it's quite a practical and situation that most CSRs would face right now. Is that generally, a lot of organizations right now have gone way over their allotted 2%, and have contributed to funds like the PM Care Fund, right? So, what is going to be the state of those CSRs that they had engaged with? Could it be that, oh, we don't have any more funds allocated for that CSR anymore? Should it shut down? What will happen to the people who are associated with that CSR in terms of the workers, in terms of the the human resource, and other than that, also the people that it could affect, that CSR? What happens to that?
So it's a slightly political question. So I'm not going to go too much into PM Cares because I have views on that, which are my personal views. But I think here's the way I look at it. A responsible company would be one that says that, yeah, I'm going to give X amount to PM Cares, but that I will still continue to do what I was doing because I'm committed to it. So in fact, you can define the responsible company almost by the one that says, I will still continue to do what I was doing and still fund COVID, because you need to fund COVID. I think everyone does have to support COVID. The channel, whether it's PM Cares or not, is a different matter. But I think that is the way I would define a responsible company. In fact, the best example I have is Tata Motors. And because I was in the group, I know this well. Tata Motors actually, for much of its last few years, did not have to contribute to CSR because it was actually loss-making. The company as a whole was making a profit thanks to Jaguar, but Indian operations were loss-making. But its CSR budget was intact because it was committed to doing this. So I think that's the way I would think of these things. I think there would be a cut for sure. I think forget CSR, even many other foundations are going to cut some of their funds because they're going to divert some of them to COVID. So we will have to accept a slightly lower budget this year because of COVID. But having said that, I think the overlaps between COVID and what we're doing is still quite significant, except the relief part of it. What happens post-relief is very much development. So to the extent of relief, and relief is an important part of COVID and is still ongoing, right. To that extent, there will be a cut, I think, in budgets, whether it's a CSR budget or even a donor budget. I think that is something which is
right. So one more question that has really come in that Shruti Mittal asks us that there are certain geographical areas that do not get a lot of projects being funded by CSR. Let's take Jammu and Kashmir, places in the northeast, the Andamans, some places in central India that really do not attract any corporate interest. So how does, as somebody who heads the CSR of a corporation, how does one look at tackling that the CSR should be more far-reaching and therefore more sustainable?
Okay, so I'm going to give you a response which not many NGOs necessarily like. So what is that response? One is, I think that companies, especially manufacturing companies, must focus on what is happening around their plants. It is an absolute responsibility for the simple reason that manufacturing is a disruptive activity. It disrupts your environment, however much you take care. It disrupts communities around you. So it is your absolute responsibility to mitigate that disruption. So you have to give priority to the disruption you have caused by being there. In fact, I would say you owe it to the community, because in many ways the community willy-nilly invited you to come and set up your plant there. So there is a responsibility you have. So I think that, so that's one part of the answer. The other part of the answer is that there is somewhere along the way a difference I have in terms of the purpose of CSR. The purpose of CSR is not for national development. Okay, that is the job of the government. Okay, government is supposed to ensure that everybody in this country, are able to fulfill their rights and acquire their freedoms. That is the job of the government. So it is not the purpose of CSR to do that. Okay. Having said that, I would still, if a company would come to me for advice, I would still say that I think you should keep some proportion of your budget to something which is not in your backyard. And that has to be a small proportion. You can argue whether it's 10% or 20%, but of that order of magnitude. But I don't think it is right or fair to expect the company to have to do something about development where it has no presence. Third point, and this is, I'll end with this. If you look at all the discussions that happened to the coming of the Act, and I was part of many of those discussions, what was said as a reason for that clause being put into the Companies Act was that we want companies to bring in their skills, their knowledge, their project management expertise to development. That was the stated reason. Now, how can a company which has an operation in Maharashtra be expected to do that in Western Odisha? They don't have there is no way they can provide that. So I think for all these three reasons, I think that companies should principally, especially manufacturing companies, should principally work around where they have a presence and mitigate all that and ensure that their employees get deployed so that all that skills and expertise is brought to bear. They need to keep some proportion because they are part of the nation. They need to contribute to nation building. So fine, they can do that. But that's the way I look at it. I don't think it is fair to judge a company by how much it spends in a backward district far away from where it is.
Right. Thank you so much, Shankar. There are a lot of questions that have come in, but we have a little bit of a paucity of time. But people should please feel free to write to us, and we will ensure that.
I'm good for another 5 minutes or so if you like.
Great. So there's this one question I really feel that we would like your take on it. Is that if I am an NGO, what would be the do's and don'ts when I approach a CSR for funding for my project, right? What would be the do's and don'ts for me as an NGO?
Well, I think the first thing you want to be very clear about is whether that company meets your certain set of internal standards that you can do business with them. Because you are going to get into an engagement and you need to be very clear that there are there's no mismatch of ethical issues, the kind of issues that you're dealing with. So for example, if you're working on the issue of violence against women, makes no sense to go anywhere near a liquor company, obviously. I mean, but otherwise, whether you want to do that is a different question. But, so I think you have to have certain hard lines that you draw of the type of companies you want to engage in. That's the first thing that you should be very, very clear about. Because this is not something you can invest time on and then say, oh, I shouldn't have done this, right? So the second thing that you need to be very clear about is what you need to do is do your research. You have to understand the company in and out before you go in and make a pitch, because you're actually going to invest a lot of time. Okay, companies are not easy to navigate. Things don't happen. See, when they have to take a business decision, they take it like that because that's what they do. When they have to take a decision like this, it is not top of the mind for them. It is not urgent for them. So they will go through the process. It will be very frustrating. You'll kind of think, are you working with the government or are you working with a private company? So, but you have to be ready to be patient. But I think you need to be very clear. I would say that if you're going to invest in the company with the only goal of getting CSR money, then I think you're missing a trick. I think you should be saying that CSR is my entry point, but I ultimately want to go beyond that to some of the things that I spoke about. In fact, ideally, I would say your holy grail is what you should go for. So in which case, every step that you're making into the company, you have to look at it as an investment, because what you're seeking from that interaction, from that relationship, is more than just that CSR. So that's the way I would sort of, so make your cutoffs, do your homework, and then make a pitch and be ready to be patient, and then keep sort of pushing in. It's the thin edge of the wedge. You got to keep hitting the wedge till you get more and more.
Thank you so much, Shankar. I think it was a great session today, and a lot of myths have been busted about, CSR and how it works. So thank you everyone for joining in, and we really want you to stay tuned for more such interesting masterclasses in the future. And please feel free to write to us if you have any other questions, suggestions. We'd be happy to answer them. And yes, the recording will be provided on YouTube. That'll be up by tomorrow. So thank you, everyone.
So I just have one thing to keep in mind.
Yes.
In my presentation, I used a lot of logos of companies and of NGOs.
Right.
I have not sought permission from them.
Right.
So I think we need to find a way to make sure that we're not, it's fine for a presentation like this, so but we just need
context.
To be careful.
We have to set this is a very informal setting, sort of a context, and so this cannot be shared outside this webinar. So thank you very much, Shankar. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye. Thanks, everyone.